My name is Clarissa Moore, a 32-year-old woman who worked her way up from nothing. I grew up in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the rough side of Atlanta, Georgia. My parents, Harold and Denise Moore, did their best to raise me and my 2 younger brothers, Eric and Leon, but money was always a problem. When I finally bought my own 4-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood, it was the proudest day of my life. I had struggled, working 2 jobs through college, dealing with failed relationships, and fighting through nights when I couldn't even afford proper meals. That house wasn't just brick and wood. It was my independence, my peace, my sacrifice, my dream realized. So when my parents suddenly told me they were moving in, it felt like a storm was about to hit my peaceful life. It was a Sunday evening. I had invited my parents over for dinner, thinking we would just laugh, eat, and enjoy each other's company. But halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat and said, "Clarissa, your mother and I have been talking. We've decided it's time for us to move in here with you. We'll be bringing our things next weekend." I froze. Fork midair. My house. My space. Without asking. "Wait, what?" I said, trying to hide the shock in my voice. Denise, my mother, smiled like it was already decided. "Baby, you have all this space. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. You don't even have children yet. It makes no sense for us to keep paying rent when you've got so much room here." I stared at them in disbelief. I took a deep breath and tried to answer carefully. "Mom, Dad, I love y'all, but this is my home. I bought it for me, for my peace of mind. I can't have anyone moving in here, not even family." The room went silent. My father's face turned red, and my mother's smile dropped. "So after all we did for you," Harold said, his voice rising, "you're going to tell us no? You wouldn't even have this house if it wasn't for us raising you." I swallowed hard. "I understand that, Dad. But I'm an adult now. This house is my boundary, my safe place. I worked for it. I can't just hand it over." That's when my mother slammed her fork down. "You are so ungrateful, Clarissa. All the nights I went without so you could eat, and now you can't let your own parents live in your home? Shame on you." By Monday morning, the whole family knew. My brothers called me, both angry. Eric said, "Clarissa, how can you tell Mom and Dad no like that? They need somewhere to stay. They gave you everything." Everything! I laughed bitterly. I worked 3 jobs to get through school. I gave myself everything. Leon added, "You're selfish. If I had a house like yours, I wouldn't even think twice about letting Mom and Dad stay." But I remembered growing up, how my parents always expected me to carry more than my brothers. I was the oldest, the responsible one, the one who had to give up my own needs so the boys could get their way. This was the first time in my life I had said no. That weekend, my parents actually showed up with bags. They rang the bell, smiling as if my earlier words were a joke. "Clarissa, open up. We're home." I stood firm at the door. "No, you are not moving in here." My father glared. "You're heartless." "No," I said with tears in my eyes. "I'm protecting myself." My mother crossed her arms. "One day you'll regret this. One day you'll be old, and your children will throw you out too." And with that, they turned, loaded their bags back in the car, and drove off. The phone calls didn't stop. My aunties, cousins, even church members called to shame me. "Clarissa, you don't turn your back on family. Girl, that's your mother and father. They raised you." But no one saw the years of guilt tripping, the emotional manipulation, the way they leaned on me while letting my brothers slide by. No one understood that this house was the only thing in my life that was truly mine. Weeks turned into months, and my parents didn't speak to me. I thought I'd feel guilty, but instead I felt free. My house was quiet, peaceful, filled with the scent of my candles, the sound of my music, and the joy of my independence. One night, I sat in the living room, sipping tea, and whispered to myself, "For once in my life, I chose me." I realized that being black in America often meant family leaned on the strongest one. I had always been that strong one. But strength also meant knowing when to stop carrying weight that wasn't mine. I loved my parents, but love didn't mean sacrificing myself. I decided I will not apologize for protecting my peace. Months later, my parents finally called. My father's voice was softer. "Clarissa, we may not agree with you, but we understand now. You've grown. You're building your own life. We just didn't want to feel left behind." For the first time, I heard their vulnerability instead of their anger. I told them, "I'll always love you. I'll always help you. But living with me is not the way." And in that moment, the weight on my chest lifted. I remained firm. My parents never moved in, and though the tension lingered, we found new ways to support each other without crossing boundaries. I learned that saying no doesn't mean you don't love your family. It means you love yourself enough to protect your life. And as I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sun set over my house, I smiled. Because this home was my story, my fight, my freedom. Weeks passed. Sundays used to mean family dinners, but now my parents refused to invite me. My brothers went, laughing and eating while I sat at home alone. I tried calling Denise one Sunday afternoon, but she answered coldly. "Clarissa, we don't have much to talk about. You've made your choice." I whispered, "Mama, I didn't mean to hurt you." "You already did." She hung up. The silence cut deeper than any words could. My cousin Sharon, who had always been my closest ally, came by one evening. "Girl, they dragging your name at every family dinner," she said, sipping her sweet tea. "Talking about how ungrateful you are." But I told them, "Clarissa earned that house by herself. You'll better respect her." I hugged Sharon tight. "You're the only one who understands." She smiled. "That's because I know what it's like to always be the one carrying family on your back. Stand strong." One Saturday morning, I heard knocking on my door. When I opened it, my mother was standing there with a suitcase. "Clarissa," she said, "your father and I fought last night. I can't stay with him. Please let me in." My heart pounded. She looked so broken. Against my better judgment, I let her inside. As my mother sat on my couch, she looked around at my home. "You really did well for yourself," she said softly. I smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mama." Then she looked at me and asked, "Why couldn't you do this for your family instead of just yourself?" The words pierced me. Even in her pain, she still couldn't see my struggle. By evening, my father was at my door. His face stormy. "Denise, get your things. You don't belong here. And you," he turned to me, "you think you're better than us because of this house. Don't forget who raised you." I stood tall. "Yes, you raised me. But I raised myself too. And I will not be guilt-tripped in my own home." My father grabbed my mother's bag, and they left without another word. The next Sunday, at church, the whispers followed me. Sister Green nudged Sister Parker, saying, "That's the one who turned her parents away." I held my head high, but inside, I felt small. My faith was strong, but the weight of judgment made me question myself. At work, my boss, Mr. Carter, noticed I was distracted. He called me into his office. "Clarissa, I don't know what you're going through, but I'll tell you this. Family will pull on you until you break. Boundaries don't mean you don't love them. Boundaries mean you love yourself enough to survive." His words gave me strength. One evening, Eric and Leon showed up at my house unannounced. "Clarissa, why you treating Mom and Dad like enemies?" Eric demanded. "You think you better than us now?" Leon added. I crossed my arms. I think I finally learned to stop letting y'all use me. That's what I think. The room went quiet. They had no comeback. Weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. Dear Clarissa, I may not always say it, but I am proud of you. You remind me of myself when I was young, determined, strong, unwilling to settle. I just never had the chance to do what you've done. Forgive me for not understanding you. I cried reading those words. At the annual Moore family reunion, tension filled the air. Aunties whispered, cousins stared, uncles shook their heads. But I stood tall. When my father got up to speak, he said, "This year, I learned something. Our children don't owe us their lives. They owe themselves their futures. And though I don't agree with everything Clarissa's done, I respect her strength." The whole room went silent. That night, my father pulled me aside. "Clarissa," he said softly, "I was wrong. I let pride make me forget that you are not a child anymore. You are a woman. I'm sorry." It was the first time I had ever heard my father apologize. Not long after, Eric lost his job. He came to me for help. "Clarissa, I know we've had our fights, but can you help me get back on my feet?" I sighed. "I'll help you, Eric, but not by giving handouts. I'll help you with a resume, job applications, and interviews. The rest is up to you." He looked disappointed but nodded. Leon, on the other hand, grew bitter. "You always think you're better than us," he spat. "You won't even help your own family properly." I shook my head. "Leon, you don't want help. You want someone to carry you. I'm done being that person." He stormed out, slamming the door. Mama and I started spending more time together. She began to see that my independence didn't mean rejection. One afternoon, she said, "Clarissa, I never had the courage to say no to my family. Maybe that's why I expected you to always say yes. But I see now, you're breaking the cycle." Her words were healing. One evening, Leon called me crying. "Clarissa, I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm always behind. You're the successful one. You're the one everybody looks up to. I feel like a failure." I softened. "Leon, you're not a failure. You just need to believe in yourself the way I had to believe in me." It was the first honest conversation we ever had. I decided to host a family dinner at my house. Nervous but determined, I cooked a full meal. As everyone sat down, I said, "This house isn't just mine. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we push through. I want us to stop fighting and start healing." Tears filled Mama's eyes. My father nodded. Eric smiled faintly. Leon looked down but didn't argue. It was a start. But healing didn't come overnight. 2 weeks later, Mama hinted again. "You know, Clarissa, if you had a husband and kids, this house wouldn't feel so empty." I chuckled. "Mama, please. Don't start again. Some things never change." I started dating again. Someone new, Anthony, a kind-hearted teacher. He respected my independence. When I introduced him to my parents, Mama said, "Finally, someone to take care of you." Anthony smiled. "With all due respect, ma'am, she doesn't need anyone to take care of her. She's been doing that just fine herself." I fell for him right there. Leon finally got serious about his life. He started a small car repair business. One day he called me, excited. "Clarissa, I made my first profit today. I feel alive again." I smiled proudly. "See, you just needed to believe in yourself." Eric found a job in IT after months of trying. "Clarissa," he said, "I used to resent you, but now I realize you weren't trying to hurt us. You were trying to push us to grow. Thank you." My heart swelled with relief. Slowly, the family gossip stopped. The same aunties who once whispered now praised me. "Clarissa's strong," Aunt Gloria said. She stood her ground, and look how the family turned out better because of it. I smiled quietly. One evening, Mama sat me down. "Clarissa, your father and I are moving to Alabama to retire. We won't be as close, but I want you to know, we're proud of you. Truly proud." Tears filled my eyes. "I love you, Mama." As the years passed, I built my own family with Anthony. We didn't always agree, but he respected my boundaries. And that, I realized, was love. One evening, I sat on my porch again, the same place I once whispered, "For once in my life, I chose me." Now, I whispered, "For once in my life, my family respects me too." Years later, my niece asked me, "Auntie Clarissa, how did you become so strong?" I smiled. By learning that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's control. And I refused to be controlled. And with that, I realized my story wasn't just mine. It was a lesson for generations after me. As I looked back on my parents' struggles, I began to understand something deeper. They weren't just being controlling. They were carrying the weight of poverty, insecurity, and generations of survival. My saying no had triggered their fear of being abandoned, not just their pride. I suggested something no one expected: family counseling. At first, my father scoffed. "Therapy? That's for white folks." But when Mama quietly said, "Harold, we need this," he agreed. In those sessions, old wounds came out. We spoke of sacrifices, favoritism, guilt, and unspoken love. For the first time, we weren't shouting, we were listening. Months after their move to Alabama, Mama called. "Clarissa, this house is small, but it's ours. And I finally feel peace." I smiled. "I'm glad, Mama. You deserve peace too." She laughed. "Maybe I learned it from you." One day, Leon asked if he could crash at my place for just a week. Old Clarissa would have said yes without thinking. But I stood firm. "Leon, I'll pay for a motel for a few nights, but you can't stay here. I need my space." He sighed but nodded. "I get it now. Boundaries." Anthony and I had been together for years. One evening, he got down on one knee. "Clarissa, you've built a home with strength and love. I want to build the rest of my life with you." Tears ran down my face as I whispered, "Yes." At the wedding, Mama held my hand. "Baby, I used to think you were ungrateful. But now I see you were wise. You saved this family more than you know." Her words were the blessing I had waited years to hear. During the father-daughter dance, Harold whispered, "I may not have understood you back then, but I understand now. Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like." I held him tighter than I ever had before. My house, once filled with tension and silence, became filled with laughter. Nieces, nephews, and cousins came over for gatherings. This time, not because they felt entitled, but because they respected the love I created within those walls. Eric found love too. At his wedding, he pulled me aside. "Clarissa, if it weren't for you pushing me, I'd still be sitting around doing nothing. You gave me tough love, and I thank you." I hugged him. "I only gave you what I gave myself: belief." Leon's car repair shop grew into a full business. One evening, he came to my porch. "Clarissa, I used to hate you for saying no. But now I respect you. You showed me that no one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves." We sat together, proud siblings at last. When Anthony and I had our first child, I promised myself something. I would raise her with love and respect, not guilt and manipulation. I whispered to my baby, "You will know freedom, not pressure. You will know love, not obligation." Years later, Mama's health began to fail. I traveled to Alabama often to care for her. One night, she held my hand and said, "Clarissa, don't cry. You gave me the gift of seeing my daughter stand strong. That's all I needed. When Mama passed, the family gathered. There were tears, but also unity. At the funeral, the pastor said, Denise raised a strong woman who broke cycles. That is her legacy. I wept, but I also smiled, because Mama had finally understood me before she left. After Mama's death, my father leaned on me more. But this time, it wasn't out of entitlement, it was love. Clarissa, he said, take care of this family. Not by carrying them, but by teaching them what you taught me. I nodded. The torch had been passed. Years later, as I sat on the same porch where my journey began, I reflected. This house had once been the battleground for guilt, shame, and family expectations. But now, it was a sanctuary, a place of laughter, growth, and love. I turned to my daughter, now a young woman, and said, This home is not just walls. It's proof that you can love your family without losing yourself. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting your peace. She smiled and said, I won't, Mama. And with that, I knew the story was complete. The cycle was broken. The lesson was passed on. The house was mine, but the legacy was for all of us.